Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Firefighters podcast, where we seek to develop, inspire, and motivate the world of the emergency services operator through a series of wide-ranging conversations. Now, before we go any further, just hit that rate, follow, or subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to. It's a key performance indicator for us and helps us reach even more people. Now, here's what we've got for you today. Today on the podcast, I'm joined by Ben Selby from the Fire Brigades Union for a proper, honest look at where the UK Fire and Rescue Service sits right now. Because if you zoom out for a second, it feels like we're fighting on multiple fronts at the same time. We're talking about funding that hasn't kept pace with demand, real-term cuts year on year, and a service that over the decade and a half has lost somewhere in the region of 12,000 firefighters in England. At the same time, risk hasn't stood still, it's increased. It's got more complex, and the expectation from the public, quite rightly, hasn't changed. In our conversation, we're going to get into what that actually looks like on the fire ground. We're going to talk about what's happening in places like Oxfordshire, where firefighters have pushed back successfully and stopped some of the changes that were being imposed. We're going to talk about Dorset and Wiltshire, where proposed cuts raise serious questions about response coverage and what it means at 3 o'clock in the morning when someone dials 999. Who's going to show up and how far away they're going to be coming from. Spend time talking a lot about the on-call system, the system that underpins huge parts of the UK Fire Service, built on community commitment and people giving up their time to serve the people where they live. Talk a little bit around national standards and the lack of them, quite frankly, and how we are moving hopefully back towards that, and how years of localism have led to this fragmentation across the sector, different ways of doing the same job, different expectations, different outcomes, and the question of whether it's time to pull some of that back together. We revisit the conversation around duty systems as modern working lives and the reality of firefighters are not just firefighters. We're parents, we're partners, we're people with complex lives outside of the job. That means that we really need to continue to look at this discussion around working patterns, around maternity, around paternity, around family support, including comparisons with countries like America, Canada, Norway, Sweden, where their approach to shift life, to family life and work is very different to what we're used to here. We touch on firefighter health, contamination and long-term risk. There's been some massive progress made in that area and significant steps forward in how that gets implemented properly. And then there's a really interesting bit about water, because it doesn't get talked about enough. We have so many conversations around tactics, training, equipment, and none of it works if the water isn't there where we need it, when we need it. Talk about the infrastructure, the flow rates, the hydrants, and the privatisation that's happened to that infrastructure in all of our communities. There's a lot in this episode, and we haven't spoke to the FBU in quite some time. I want to continue to keep that conversation going, having them on more frequently. They're doing some incredible work. So in this one today, it's operational, it's political, it's cultural, and it's personal. And just before we get into it, quick correction. At one point in the conversation, I do say 1,200 firefighters since 2010. Spotted that in the edit, full brain fart, had a quiet swear, and then move on. But the point still stands. We have lost a significant number of firefighters, 12,000. And this conversation is really about what that means, not just as a number, but in terms of capability, safety, and the future of the Fire and Rescue Service. I'll see you on the other side. Feels like we're fighting harder than ever. When you look at everything that's happening in Oxfordshire, in Dorset and Wiltshire, is it as bad as it looks? I feel like we're on the brink of national industrial action. It feels very intense. It feels like everyone's very busy fighting harder than ever for some of the rights of firefighters in the UK at the minute.
Yeah, well, you know as well as I do, Pete, what we've seen in the UK Fire and Rescue Service for 15 years now, maybe even more so than that, is the fire service cut and then cut again and then they return again and again. And what we've seen over the time is that erosion in our ability to do what firefighters signed on the dotted line to do. And really, I think we've got to that real pinch point now where firefighters are saying, actually, if you keep doing this, it's unsafe for us. Obviously, there are impacts on their personal lives as well, which we'll fight for. But it's not safe for us. It's not safe for the public. Is kind of the primary kind of positions that local brigade committees are coming to. And when we have a discussion nationally, we talk about how we can support them in those local campaigns, and we've really switched to trying to be on the front foot in those discussions. So it is about speaking to politicians and making sure that they put the money into local services, but it's also challenging those services to ensure that the impact of their budgetary constraints isn't necessarily at the doorstep of firefighters and at the public. Sometimes that's difficult to balance. I understand that. But actually, we shouldn't be in a case where we are today that our fire services aren't anywhere near adequate to respond to the communities as they once were, actually not that long ago.
That's what I was stopping myself from interrupting, saying, where you're like, we don't want to get to a point where, and I'm like, haven't we passed that point? Haven't we walked past that line in the sand? We'll come on to talking some of the stuff around whether it's the water elements or whether it's crewing, whether it's stations. I mean, people will know the figures anyway, but for internationals, we've got 1,200 less firefighters than we had in 2010. And you guys and girls got 50-something MPs to come and support this. And if we've got, or if from my external view, if it looks as though we're getting that sort of support, then what is stopping it? Where are the no's coming from? The no's got to be coming from someone, because our funding increases just continue to sit below inflation. There's so many real-time cuts. There's growing risks and responsibilities. But I think I was reading that the total funding is lower than it even was a decade ago. Yeah, that's just ridiculous.
Funding's been falling pretty much year on year for 16 years.
Are we just not screaming loud enough? Do people? Does the government not care? Who am I laying this blame at the feet of?
I think we can lay it at the feet of a myriad of different parts of the sector, really, Pete. I think first and foremost, certainly through the austerity years, we found probably the greatest challenges fire services were feeling. Certainly the big significant chunks of those cuts, as you say, the kind of put 12,000 firefighters since 2010. Most of those came in those early phases of that kind of political program, if you like, austerity. But what we've seen since then is when you try and then make another cut on top of what you did 5 or 6 years ago, actually it's going beyond the pale, as many firefighters determine. You're not able to sometimes deal with that through natural wastage, for instance, and that then immediately impacts on our active members, our firefighters in today's kind of fire and rescue services. But actually, it really is starting to concern our members in terms of their ability to respond to the needs of their community. And I think certainly if you take the examples of Oxfordshire and the success we've had there, we've been, first of all, we've been able to convince local politicians of the impact that this may have on their communities. And frankly, they have to listen. They're representatives of those communities. We were able to convince, people within Westminster as well of the impact of those cuts. But actually, to one sense, the Oxfordshire one wasn't necessarily an attempt to fit to national, the budgetary kind of constraints set nationally. It was about a reorganisation of resource in that service, but we felt that was going to be detrimental to the deliverance, both in terms of our members responding to emergencies, but also what the public get ultimately.
So that, for context on that one, so you'll have to, I'm sure I'm going to fumble it, but it was Woodstock, Henley. So they were proposing removing or reducing on-call cover. Was it 3 on-call stations? Yeah, was it? I think it was just a 3 on-call, not just 3 on-call stations.
Yeah, and there was an amalgamation of a station as well. So it was again
Easham.
Quite a wide attempt at reorganisation there. And as I say, Pete, our members felt that hadn't been thought through to the necessary degree that they believe it should have done. And there was significant impact on terms and conditions. They were trying to force 12-hour shifts there. There was significant impact in terms of the delivery our members were able to give to their local communities. And that really brought about that discussion about how we push back on that. And as I say, we've been successful in that regard in Oxfordshire, and we're trying to use that now as a blueprint in Dorset and Wiltshire. We're now here in discussions in another brigade in the southeast. How can we utilise and learn from our successes to ensure that we're able to, as I say, apply a blueprint to these practices in different services? Because once one starts to move, we do see, don't we, in the service that others follow. Yeah.
History doesn't repeat itself, but it definitely rhymes, is the problem. It feels a bit like, I did 10 years on call, and a lot of these, you'd be forgiven for saying it looks very much like they're consciously or unconsciously seem to be targeting our on-call retained duty systems. I'm sure they'll probably justify it through low availability, unreliable, keeping the trucks on the road. I've not seen whatever their justifications are, but when I was an on-call firefighter, there's always felt, or it was then, and I bet it is still sometimes, the whole two-tier system. Our second-class citizens, on-call make up the vast majority of the UK Fire and Rescue Service. These are stations that are built on communities. They ain't doing it for the money. I'm not going to repeat the over and over and over lines that everybody always says, because it is the truth. These people ain't doing it for the money. They are there as part of their community, and I just feel like this is another kick in the proverbials for those individuals. It all seems to be not blaming the on-call, but it's targeted at the on-call. There's 3 stations there. There's 8 now. I think it's 8, isn't it, in Dorset and Wiltshire? I think are they all largely on-call?
Yeah.
William Wood Watches are back supporting the podcast, and honestly, it means a lot to me because this brand is built on real service heritage. Whether it's the melting down of the original 1920s British brass firefighter helmets, and they're building them into the actual case backs, and they also use upcycled fire hose on all of their straps. It's not just design, it's about the job, and it's built into every single component. I've been wearing them for 10 years now. Found them back in 2015, actually, and they've genuinely been a part of my daily kit ever since. I've got 2. I've got the Valiant, and I've got the Chivalrous as well in midnight blue. But the thing about the brand, about William Wood Watches, it stands so different because of its story. Take, for example, their Dunkirk watch. That's not just a timepiece. It's actually built to honour the Massey Shore fireboat. And that vessel actually helped save over 600 troops during the Dunkirk evacuation in World War II. And if you own one, your name is engraved onto the plaque on the Massey Shore itself. So you're not just wearing history, you're actually becoming part of it yourself. I'll be honest though, the one I've got my eye on this year is the Fearless watch. It's more of like a field watch on the station, on the watch. It's a smaller 39mm case, compact, rugged, just feels right for the job. If you're under that quality, you get a full 3-year warranty, and they've got service centres in the UK, North America, Asia, and it's Great Britain's #1 watch manufacturer on Trustpilot. So you can actually get 10% off a William Wood watch by using code FFPodcast. If you want to be part of the history and you want to wear it on your wrist, jump in the notes, check out William Wood Watches. Let's get back to the show.
I started my career off as an on-call firefighter, as a retained firefighter is the term we tend to use. And I'm incredibly proud of the service I gave as a retained firefighter. And, like so many, it wasn't necessarily about earning money. It was about providing to the community that I'd lived in for quite some time before that. And I think retained firefighters are extremely proud of what they're able to offer. But it is a system for which has been difficult in terms of managing things like recruitment and retention for some time. Communities have changed. The demographics of society have changed, where there was communities in villages around retained stations because there was some form of industry there. Those industries have moved differently.
I get that, but the problem's changed, but the need is still there. So I just feel like you haven't thrown, not you, but we haven't thrown, any old service, you haven't thrown enough resources at trying to solve that problem, because it has been the perennial problem for 40 years, maybe 30 years.
Well, and we've probably, if it's been a problem for 30 years, we've at least seen 30 reviews of it as well, Pete. And in truth, I think we need to look slightly bigger and strategically at the issue rather than just looking for short-termist, sticking plaster measures to fix.
I know people say they don't do it for the money, and I just said it as well. But doesn't mean you couldn't still acknowledge it, because people could move to a better pace. I mean, I say could.
Yeah.
Everybody's got a bucket of money. It's up to you how you spend it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
we'll spend some of it on culture, some of it on decon, some of it on this. I'm like, you could try paying them appropriately.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it to one extent it does come to pay to an extent. But when we set up the national working group to look at it with the national employers a few years ago, it came out of that 2022 dispute. We were able to split the kind of discussion into 3 areas. One was around the flexibility firefighters have, especially when their crewing numbers are so small, they lose that flexibility and ability to take short periods away from kind of being on call. There was the issue of money. We were able to try and address that, or take a stepping stone would be my terminology in terms of addressing that. But then there was the issue of activity. Now, firefighters where there are low crewing or they're off the run, those left are inevitably going to be less active than those that are fully established and crewed. Yeah. But equally, can we look at what additional work they could do in different ways Some services are promoting the use of retained firefighters in terms of home fire safety checks, i.e. getting them out and about into their community. Could that be done differently? And then we entered the discussions about what other work firefighters could do going forward.
Someone said one to me the other day about the decon vans. So when any whole-time crew gets mobilised to a property fire or any kind of carbonaceous event, carbonaceous fire, some services have a vehicle that will go out with uniform and cylinders and stuff. Otherwise, the crew are off the run and have to go and change over at stores and whatever. And we were like, well, yeah, that's a resource. Bang that on an on-call station. As soon as they tip out, Yeah. I'm like, have you seen many people? I can't remember where I heard it. I don't know if that's actually a thing. But I was like, that's a good idea. I know we're not in the ideas phase, but
if you've heard it, it's probably a thing. It's the fire service, isn't it? But things like that are initiatives, I think, that could increase that activity. And I think we're all for that because, as I say, there were those three areas that we needed to address. It just wasn't in the gift of the NJC to fix the issue of activity at that time. But, we did try and increase the ability to be more flexible by, rather than there just being two tiers of retaining fee, we incorporated others and obviously the pay lifted in that regard to the second element. But that activity element, we knew it was a kind of wider piece of, there was a new government coming in. It was talking about fire service reform. We've started those discussions about pay reform. How do you bring those two things together to meet many different kind of aims and objectives? There's been a challenge, but we're on that path now. I'm not saying it's going to fix everything, but I hope it goes somewhere.
How are them chats going? Because I imagine everyone's banging their fist on the table for money. It just seemed like NHS, trained staff, refuse, bin men and women. I don't know what the proper term is. Everyone is struggling. I mean, you just look at there was a piece in the magazine actually, like the last few months. Jesus, fuel and stuff like that. Yeah. My God, the cost of living just took a sharp spike with some crazy Trumpisms. You know what I mean?
Challenge. And I think it's important to separate it from those kind of annual pay discussions because really our annual pay should keep pace with the kind of economic situation the country's in. And that I think is an important part. But certainly in terms of the reform discussions, I think my understanding is certainly from my perspective, from the union's perspective, from the national employers, and to a degree from the Fire Minister's perspective, is how we utilise those discussions to make a business case for investment. So that, it's a hell of a responsibility to carry, but I think it's important that when we come together in those spaces with the likes of Phil Garrigan, Sarah Ward from the employers, we're able to say, actually, we've got a shared vision here. We think the fire service can assist you in some other parts of governmental policy, specifically around things like civil contingency. Civil protection is a big piece of work being done. Globally, it's slightly more insecure than what it's been for a few decades before. What can the fire service do to assist, as, for instance, the fire service has done to assist in Scandinavian countries in and around that space? So those discussions are ongoing, Pete, but they're not easy to come to immediate answers to. But I hope that probably by the middle of next year, middle of 2027, we're closer to being able to, fix some of those holes.
You mentioned workforce changes. There's some stuff around employment. There's some. It's come out in April, I think it has, hasn't it? There's stuff around statutory sick pay, paternity and parental leave. I had a 6-hour employment law CPD session the other day. Some bits were actually really interesting. There was conversations around apprenticeships. Was one conversation that took up a lot of time because I'll probably get this wrong, and I don't know if it's come in this one, but they were saying things around, you have to get rid of people in the first 4 months if you want to get rid of them. The whole you've got a year or even 2 years apprenticeship. Like it used to say, you've got a year on your probation if you're a standard employer. And now it is day one, you have got full statutory sick pay, you've got full paternity, you've got full parental leave. Same with promotions as well. It's easy to give someone a job. It's really hard to get them out of it if it doesn't look like it's a good fit for them, if it's not what you thought it was, if we're really not spending, and this is my concern, I don't think we spend enough time. I'm not saying we recruit bad people, but I don't think we spend enough time in what good recruitment would look like. And I don't mean that's, again, I'm not saying we get bad people in, but I'm saying, do we get people that fully understand the job and it's right for them? Not that they're good or bad, but do you know what I mean? Just looking for optimum people that we're selecting. What do you think has affected or changed for us from an employment perspective? And I think a lot of it's probably good. I imagine the FBU is in favour of a lot of it because it's protecting people from day one, which is the good side. Is there any concerns regarding it?
Well, I think it's first important to note that actually, I think as a union, we were one of the unions right at the forefront of campaigning, both within the Labour Party before they took up government.
Yeah.
But certainly as they were building the manifesto, and then once they were elected, immediately holding them or their feet to the fire to ensure that they delivered on some of these employment rights, and to an extent they have. Do we want as a union for it to go further in some regard? Yeah, of course, yeah. But there's a whole host of things that we want to see included in things like employment rights and workplace rights. But it's a really important step that has been taken to ensure that workers are protected and less vulnerable in and around work. And, I think
it's a special concern for our Green Book staff, isn't it, for me?
I think so. And I think one thing...
People might not think it as a firefighter, but I'm like, well, a lot of them are on temporary contracts that just keep getting kicked down the road another 12 months, another 12 months. They can't get a mortgage. They can't do this. They can't do that. They haven't got the same rights.
No,
but you're seeing them at work every day. And like,
day one rights is critically important to some of that, Pete, as well. But yeah, one thing I've observed, especially being in this role, is when I sit and I look at other workforces, not just in the fire sector, but elsewhere across public sector. Some are far more vulnerable to bad employment processes than others. And I think we've got quite an extensive and, hard fought for terms and conditions set in the Grey Book that have, to an extent, protected firefighters for quite some time, and we need to hold on to that as tightly as possible, and we'll fight for that, I'm sure, for decades and decades to come. But what it needs to sit alongside, and it's, we probably both remember a fire service that had a lot of these, is standards, national standards that aren't selectable, they're mandatory. That say how we recruit firefighters, what we expect firefighters to do during a development phase, and what other type of people we want in the service. And that's
NFCC
why we're campaigning for standards alongside all of this as well.
MSA are supporting us on today's podcast, and I chose to partner with them because I've been wearing this stuff for nearly 20 years, and they are the global leader in development, manufacture, and supply of incredible, safe products that really protect people, not just our communities out there, but also first responders, most importantly, all over the world. Get yourself over to MSA and have a look at it. The high performance protective clothing for emergency services responders. They also partner with us on the UK Pink Firefighters. That's because we love them. The helmets with the reflective visor, the F1XF, absolutely epic helmet. And not forgetting how they improve firefighter safety through their connectivity in the connected firefighter platform. MSA are always pushing the envelope, and it's a real privilege to be able to continue to grow our partnership together. So whether it's your PPE, your bunker gear, your helmets, your SCBA, your thermal imaging, your Luna, or your portable gas detection, both of us know that this equipment needs to work. It needs to be high quality, reliable, and dependable in the moment. And that's why I use MSA, because they know what's at stake. Do you think, it's a good point to bring it in, because I said it at the NFCC recently. I actually stole it from Jonathan Smith, LFB's commissioner. He was like, 2002, 2003 strikes, Bain review, I think it was, wasn't it? And he says we burnt national standards on a bonfire of localism. Do you know what I mean? He said, I think we deprofessional. I'm probably misquoting him. Sorry, Jonathan. But like we deprofessionalized a lot of the sector in that bit. And then we ended up scattering everybody to the wind, and we ended up with these local legends. Some we had great practices and some great organizations, and some just got a little bit lost. Yeah. And the union is a bit like, yes, the kid stood in the middle trying to pull everybody back together, probably with the NFCC as well, coming in different angles, trying to pull everybody back together. That must continue to be a challenge with a lot of localisms.
Yeah, well, I think if you look around that time as well, there was the removal of the inspectorate as well. So not only did we go from a set of standards being judged, we went to pretty much nothing. Do what you want in
Do what
your
you
own
want, and no one's
area.
marking your homework anymore.
Yeah, and look, we saw that, and then things like RMP came in, and the processes there were for local determination. And I think what we have seen over that 25 years is a fragmentation of services. I think even if, I look back to my later time in Lincolnshire, we were doing things very different to any neighbouring service. And actually, most of the time I was at Grantham, right on the border of two more counties, and we would go out to incidents and we'd all be doing things differently. That can't be the most effective and
Madness.
efficient way to behave.
Yeah.
And so I think that we do need to return to standards, and that requires us to work with the inspectorate as well to make sure that that we're able to design standards for which can be inspected against, and we can see where we all sit in that. But I would say that again, that's another thing that requires a degree of investment, Pete, because if we all accept we're going to have to lift a lot of services upwards, we're going to have to invest and give them the resource to be able to lift themselves. That doesn't actually depreciate the great work and professionalism firefighters do, but they're doing it within the structure for which they're given, and that has been pressurised for quite some time in terms of that fragmentation.
It's not something that we're necessarily going to talk about, but it might be a little segue from here. When do you think is going to be the next attempt at some regionalisation work? We look at the process that's happened with Scotland over the last number of years as they've gone from 8 down to 1. Again, recent conversations, Jonathan being one of them. And I know it's easy for LFB to say this because it's likely never to happen to them because they're so big. But is it sustainable to keep having 40-something different versions of stuff with the financial pressures if we are already talking about, hey, let's make the policies similar, let's bring equipment and procedures and recruitment and make it easier for staff to transfer between each other? Well, I tell you what, let's just join up. That would make it easier, unless, of course, that means we only need one chief, in which case I'm not for it. Pessimist. Sorry, I put that in the end there. What do you think that's feeling like? Do you think we're going to see any more of that in the next decade?
I think to an extent the writing's on the wall with the move in terms of devolution.
Feels it, doesn't it?
Yeah, especially when you look across to policing and the recent review in policing and kind of the mergers that will occur from that. To an extent, though, again, some of this has been successful in the fire service. I think the most recent one was Hampshire, Isle of Wight, Dorset and Wiltshire, Devon and Somerset. You spoke about Scotland. Some of this has happened. It does feel like we've got a lot of services. We've not necessarily come to a final position on it at all yet, Pete. And I think we want to see the detail of what's being proposed here rather than comment too early. But yeah, there will be some risks to it. There may be some pros to it. And I think we need to break it down and think that through. But I do think that devolution agenda that is being pushed quite heavily is almost setting a pace now, and we've got to make sure we're able to react to it. For me, it's about how governance then is implemented. For instance, there seems to be a reliance on models like London and Manchester. Both are actually a little bit different, and both have pros and both don't. But I think we would say we're pleased to see them moving away from that PFCC model, for which firefighters and kind of their representatives found it difficult to engage within and hold people to account and, and have input on decisions was kind of limited. In London and Manchester, our ability to access those governance models is far easier than what it is in PFCC models. And we're invited in, we're part of the discussion. And I would say, in some sense, successful in terms of working within those models. But yeah, that's the bit that interests me, how that kind of accountability fits, how investment fits, and then kind of what it delivers ultimately is kind of where I would start from. But I would say a lot, you spoke about those issues. I think a lot of that comes after you input a set of national standards, because otherwise you are
that makes it so much easier.
Yeah, you are going to end up with 2 or 3 very different places for which you're trying to bring together.
And there'll be the local, disagreements and who's better and all this sort of stuff. But I think we'll try and argue out of logic. We'll go, well, it's logical why we do it this way and you do it that way. But honestly, I think I think always we're making decisions out of emotion, and then we scramble together logic, most of us, to try and support what our emotional decision was. And I think for a lot of people, it would be, I don't want to lose our badge.
No,
That'll
I
be
think
it.
people get
It'll
quite
be a lot of
proud.
romanticism around the badges and the identity that the service wants to maintain. When realistically, if it was their money, they'd be like, yeah, it makes way too much sense not to do it.
Yeah, and
And
look,
also,
I
you'd
speak to
be
people in
stronger together,
Scotland, and
won't
they
we?
still refer to them sometimes themselves as not necessarily Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, but Tayside
Of
or
course.
or a
Yep.
different part. And fair
Seen
enough,
it.
because actually we're proud. We're proud of what we've done, and we're proud of where we joined. It's important, but equally, modernisation is happening, and I think it's important that we're in the discussion to shape it to our best interests, rather than that just of people that sometimes haven't had anything to do with our sector before they've popped up. So being part of the discussion, I think, is critically important. And to be that, you've got to be open-minded in terms of where you step into those spaces.
Is there still much conversation around different shift models anywhere? I was speaking with a few different firefighters globally, and they were asking questions about our systems, as they often do, and the popular ones, and the shorter days, the longer nights, and you see core systems in places like the US where they're still doing the 48 off and the 24 on, or the 24/72s or whatever it might be. And I wondered, because I know it was against work time regulations and stuff like that when we ended up getting rid of the day crewing bits. Has there been any movement there? Are people still trying to bring those conversations up? Has there been any more we are lucky to have a lot of different duty systems across the UKFRS now. A lot more family friendly, a lot more diversity for people's life chapters. I still think there would be, transparently for me, there would be popularity to bring back more systems that we've already explored. Is there anyone making any noise about that? Am I talking out my arse?
No, you're not. It comes up quite regularly as
okay. I thought it would do.
Yeah, well, a few things on that. I start off with saying I think it's better to have more systems than less.
Definitely.
Because we all go through different points within life where we need to find a duty system to fit that time. When I had our first child, I certainly didn't want to be on one duty system. I wanted to be on another one, and that would have changed. A few years later, I took up these roles though. But you do want to be able to move through duty systems to suit your time or where you are at that time. So I do appreciate that. So having more options is better. But in my view, those options have to be very fair to the individual. And not necessarily always perfectly fair to the employer. If you take the day crewing plus close proximity crewing, I think that gave a lot to the employer and very little to the individual. And frankly, we don't want to return to the Victorian ages of fire service provision.
But there was waiting lists. People did want to do it. Maybe that could still be deemed a system of abuse. Just because someone wants to do it doesn't mean it's fair on them. I get that.
Yeah.
But as, competent,
no, I agree there was.
conscious adults.
I think if you...
That upset a lot of people. It did upset a lot of people.
It did. And look, and I, at the time, had to go and have some very difficult conversations, Pete. But...
Firefighters, police officers and first responders are now stepping into environments wired with more high voltage than ever before. Everything from electric vehicles to solar panels feeding direct current through compromised structures, overhead power lines and illicit drugs factories with improvised lethal bypasses. Any single strike in the wrong place in this type of environment can turn things fatal very quickly. And that is exactly why we've partnered with Jafco. You already know Jafco are. They have been relied upon for decades for sturdy, get-the-job-done equipment, and they are not resting on their laurels. They are evolving to face the challenges first responders are handling today through their insulated tool range. These are purpose-built for the scenarios where contact with hidden electrical hazards isn't just possible, it is increasingly likely. Their insulated tools are engineered for real-world abuse and use, designed to keep firefighters, police officers, and all first responders alive in environments where electrification is outpacing policy, equipment, and training. And you know this. This is the kind of innovation our sector needs and the kind of investment organizations should be stepping up to support if we are serious about protecting first responders from fatal consequences. So a massive thank you to Jafco for backing the podcast and backing the crews on the ground. go check them out, learn what they're doing, and bring that conversation into your service, because this isn't about the future, it's about right now.
I do stand by the point that actually the financial incentive applied to them was purposeful. And had wages kept pace with where they should have done, would individuals had to have found routes by which to extend their earnings slightly. The context of the time, I think, is important to look at too. We were going through significant amounts of wage restraint, pay freezes, limitation, inflation at 3 or 4%, and firefighters' wages lifting by 1%. People will naturally then think, actually, my cost of living is going up more than my wages. What can I do? And I think you force people into making some difficult, dark choices in that regard. So I think context of the time is important, but equally so's the law. And the law said that those were not okay. And I'm trying to be careful with my language, as you'd appreciate.
I know.
Because, well, look, what we did
can
outside
you
of
can
that,
put the local agreements around and all that jazz, but the
where
law
your
did
question
say
was
this.
getting to was, what are we doing about it? Well, we've started, I'd say 2/3 of the way through, really seriously looking at things like 24-hour duty systems. There are people that want to move to those systems. There are people that don't. And so what we've done is we've said we need to review this in the round. So we need to speak to both of those or all of those differing perspectives. We want to look at it internationally. You've spoken about the US, but I went over to Norway and Sweden earlier this year to look at their system. Again,
what are they doing?
Very different contexts in terms of workplaces, buildings, etc., provisions in and around 24-hour duty systems. For instance, their paternity and maternity rights are far, far greater than ours.
I was about to mention that one. Isn't that absolutely mad? Let's take that segue.
They do it on call rates, so their busiest stations don't work those systems, their quieter ones do. So there are things we need to think about. And so rather than say, right, it's got to be this outcome, we've said we'll do this full kind of review and bring out all these strands. We need to speak to our equality sections who have had some concern for it, that these systems aren't necessarily family friendly and they don't support certainly mothers returning back into workplaces, doesn't necessarily support black and ethnic minority members that perhaps are going through a religious season like Ramadan and can't necessarily withstand 24 hours at work. It's about bringing all of those differing views together and looking at if it's something we want to move forward on. But I do start with that starting point where we began this part of the discussion, that we do need to have more systems for people to work, but they need to be agreed and they need to be legal. Do
you think we've
start there, then we'll get to the right points, I'm sure.
Do you think we've devalued? This is a completely non-fire service question. Sorry. Do you think we've devalued the family feel of the UK? Because you just mentioned Sweden and Norway, and it's like I've got it in front of me now. 49 weeks at full pay in Norway. If you have a baby, 49 weeks at full pay, 480 days per parent. Per child at 80% in Sweden, because they really value, firstly, normalizing caregiving for men, removing the stigma around taking leave, and supporting the well-being and retention and the community of what is valued by having families that spend time together. And I know FBU's got nothing to do with this, and it's probably feel free to ignore the question, but I'm just like, is that a utopian pie in the sky idea? Is the UK ever going to get back to anything like that? We've just got so used to two-person income households, haven't we? You both need to be earning forward. Get back out there. Get back in the rat run. Get back on the treadmill, hedonic treadmill. Get back into your job. You look at what they're doing and you go, that is so different. That is so different. And I'm sure society and their communities are better off for it.
Yeah, I think we could end up deep in politics around
Sorry,
neoliberalism.
you mentioned it. I just wanted to give people insight if they didn't know that.
It's important to think, because when you are talking about duty systems, how things all fit within wider society matters. Yeah. And for instance, one thing I was arguably shocked to hear, first of all, in Scandinavia, is the provisions that families have to have kind of childcare. That provision in the UK really is just slightly longer than school hours, 8 till 6. There it's from, I think, 6 in the morning till 11 p.m.
Yeah.
So you can access
Then they're
if you've
everywhere.
got shifts
There's
finishing
loads
at
of them in the
different times,
communities.
you can access the support around them. And actually, I think the maternity provisions are, well, it's been argued, are closer to 2 years now in Scandinavia in certain parts. So, we've got a lot of catching up to do to.
And people say, but it's
get
the cost, it's the cost. Yeah, but there's a cost both ends, because there's a massive cost to families falling apart. When you have a child, I've had kids, and it's tough. It squeezes everything, squeezes time, squeezes emotion, squeezes money.
Yeah.
And I know, a lot of the union stuff is around the whole fire service family, around family feel, working hours, whether it's pay or it's working hours. And that's such a random segue. But for people that haven't looked at it, feel free to just go and have a look yourself at how. And this is why when people throw out ideas, they're like, "Oh, you're stupid," and you're like, "Well, they're doing it there. I was just there. You were just there."
Your point, though, Pete, about can we catch up? I'd argue yes, we can when we organise and when we make these demands, because again, it's some things are journeys, but we began the idea of the Fight for 52, that campaign around maternity pay in the fire service 3 years ago, and we've seen it double in the fire service, and in some services, I think it's 8 or 9 services now are adopting the full 52 weeks.
I know.
So yes, we can.
Yeah.
But we have to work together. We have to, be unified. We have to find the right arguments and the case to do so, and then organise around that. And again, I think we have been successful. We've still got a long way to go to get to the 52 weeks, and no one's going to let up on that. No. But we're chipping away at it, and we're making those advances.
But if you'd have asked women in the fire service 10, 15 years ago, they'd have said never. Never would have been an answer.
Yeah.
They would have, not from all of them, but some of them would have said never. Yeah. And you're like, well, come back in less than a decade or whatever it is.
Yeah.
They wouldn't have believed it.
Certainly
That's
proud
been
of
massive.
That campaign, and our women's committee should be proud of leading it in the way they have done. Yeah. We're brilliant in terms of our 3 equality sections, all pulling together in and around issues like that. But you're right. We have to accept that a lot of women have left the service because they've not necessarily returned after, their maternity provision, and services couldn't ignore that, frankly. And you can't ignore the evidence around our decon work around fire contaminants that point towards the fact that, mothers and newborn children have to be provided safe environments, and rushing women back to work when they're breastfeeding doesn't suit anybody in the long term.
Certainly not the child or them. But you mentioned the health. You went to Health and Safety FBU Health and Safety Conference recently. Was it a month ago? Something like that?
We held our summit, a few weeks ago.
Yeah, summit. I apologise. There's been a lot of noise around the contamination work and some incredible improvements. I would say personally, it's like the last 5 years. I spend a lot of time talking about fire behaviour and reading books and doing stuff. So I wanted to try and pull away from solely the lens of contamination, because I feel like, and tell me if I'm wrong, I feel like 80% of the heavy lifting there has been done. We've pushed hard. We've got great equipment, resources, safe decontamination processes and station refits and all that jazz. The other 20% needs to be behavioural now. That's on a lot of the people, and the FBU have done a lot, great decontamination campaigns around the behavioural side. What are the other themes that are coming up? What's the next big challenge or simultaneous challenge that we're trying to wrestle with? Because I feel like we're over the hill. Maybe I'm wrong. I feel like we're over the hill with contamination. I think there's more to be done around blood testing, and I'd like to see more particulate protection in fire kit and or undergarments.
We're nearly at the top of the hill, I would say. Okay. I think we've won the argument, which was, I think, the biggest task that we needed to do. Yeah. Although, again, it comes back to that investment argument. In some services that have managed to find the finances to respond to the issue, I think we've done very well. And there are some really good. Tyne and Wear, for example, is a great example of the work done in and around that space to improve workplace practices and buildings, for instance, to be able to be safer spaces. But there are services that are lagging, and sometimes that is through no fault of their own. They're just not financially able to
That's the Peter principle, isn't it?
That's
it's the Matthew. It's like the rich get richer, the poor get poorer. Yeah. Well, okay, well done, Tyne and Wear.
Again, it's another one of those.
You can afford to do it. That's not
Yeah.
fair. It makes it look like you care more from a values perspective. And
Yeah.
I'm not throwing salt at the great work they've done, but it's not that so-and-so doesn't care. They literally can't do it. They'd have to close 2 stations to free up the money to do that or something else.
Yeah,
But it
and we
makes it
still
look
see the
like they're not
behavioural
listening.
issues as well, Pete. You know, we
Yeah.
see firefighters with dirty helmets and not, putting their kit through laundry. That said, I think now we're at a point where people know that's wrong. So
Yeah.
in terms of hearts and minds, I think we've again won an argument, but it needs a degree of self-regulation. It needs their buddies to go, come on,
Yeah.
you need to put your helmet through laundry, or, you need to do this differently. Don't put that dirty kit on the appliance, for instance, and doing things or challenging in a local way. But I think you're right. I think we're towards the top of the hill in terms of changing that. But yet we've still got to see a little bit more work done to finalise that. The big announcement at the summit, of course, from the Health Secretary was around the kind of testing, health monitoring of firefighters. I think that's another important point, because actually you don't know sometimes you've got the cancers caused from decontamination until you've been tested, and actually
So
having
people that don't know what that is, what is actually happening?
Well, we want
for people
firefighters to be monitored.
Okay. Quick pause, because I want to tell you about a new partnership we have with First Tactical. First Tactical builds equipment for people who work when environments are seriously unforgiving. And if you go to their website, you'll find kits designed specifically for us, for firefighters, for police officers, technical rescue teams, fire investigation, hazmat, hazardous materials teams, urban search and rescue. This is honestly the equipment that you really want to rely on. It's built for real operations, real pressure, long ass days, and I genuinely use this stuff. Here's a few of my favorites. They've got their men's Defender short sleeve. I've got that in black. It's got a huge load of specialized pockets, space for all of our gears, the pads, the pens, all of the stuff. It's got them on the sleeves on both sides. Also got the Defender pants. These have got 28 pockets in total on them. It's mad. Let's be honest, we absolutely love the bags. I use their 25-litre specialist half-day backpack. The shoulder straps as well are strong AF. Like I say, this isn't lifestyle gear. It's built for real world, real operations. We talk about the realities of the job, and First Tactical is just the ideal partnership for us. So go take a look, firsttactical.co.uk. Now back to the show.
But we know firefighters are at a higher rate in terms of getting cancer, and we want firefighters to be tested to make sure that any intervention needed is done as early as possible. And we all know. I think every firefighter knows of somebody, whether it be on their watch or they've worked with previously and recently retired or have retired some time before, that has got a cancer, and it's very, very likely because of the work they did. And what we need to do is make sure that when that happens, the interventions that can happen medically are as early as possible, because we all know what happens when they happen too late. Again, so that's a campaign that's been funded solely by our lottery. We've worked with great people like Anna Steck at the University of Lancashire, and as you say, we've developed those policies and those discussions and started to change hearts and minds. But we needed some governmental intervention as well, and it looks like that machine is now finally moving. So after over a decade,
What will that look like in people's actual lives? How will they see that manifest out the other end of the sausage machine? So are we going to see it annually in services? Are we going to be getting, are our OH departments going to do it? Is it going to be an NHS intervention? For people that don't know anything about it, how are we going to be, and is this going to be mandated to services, or do they have to opt in, or how's it going to work?
Well, the government have, in short, said that they're going to do it. And that was for probably 10 years. They said they wasn't particularly that interested in it, or there'd be a project to look at it and it'd never bring out the end result. So we've got that decision, if you like, which is really good. How it works in practice needs to be worked about. So we've got the decision, we know the final destination. How we get there, we need to talk through. So the work's been handed across to that ministry advisory group for it to kind of work about how we get the right practices. I think for us, we've been very clear. We want it to not just be for firefighters in the job today, but those that have left our industry, are in retirement, or have taken up other employment as well. Because we know that, you don't have to go to that many fires. You only have to go to one to increase the risk that, of cancer. So that's one of the expectations we'll be placing on the MAG, on the ministers, How it works in practice, we need to work through in that regard. But, things have been done before. We saw legislation change. We saw monitoring of asbestos change. Actually, again, not that long ago. So we need to look at those processes. I remember my last medical in the service had an asbestos part to it as well. And this, for instance, could fit in a similar way to that in terms of how we monitor cancers in firefighters.
So, changing gears, if we could, to there was an interesting article in the latest FBU magazine around water provision, water infrastructure, the actual realities on the fire ground, and the challenges that we're continuing to face with pressure and flow. I know from the other side of the same side, but like from the fire behavior world, we're talking a lot about how we are not adequately flowing at incidents. Looking at the critical flow rates that we're supposed to be achieving to be most effective at these incidents, we're not correctly assessing the size ups, and we're not sure what the flow we're supposed to be achieving. And most of us operate in pressure and not flow. But anyway, even if we got all that right, the water companies are privatized, and there's a number of really good points in the article, and I'd encourage people to go and have a read around reduced pressure and issues, times of day, accidents and injuries that have happened to firefighters from defective hydrants that people probably won't be familiar with. I don't know if I can try and find the context and how many it was. And then also the amount of people that have got sick from infected water supplies. Take that in whatever direction you want, but it does seem like, again, if you're not tools to do the job, if you're not giving us the money, not giving us the resources, and now the infrastructure is not going to be there, even if we do happen to arrive with enough people on the fire engine that are of a good culture and are happy and healthy to be there, we're not even getting enough water out of the hydrant.
Yeah. I mean,
it's just like, if you designed it to try and make us fail, this is what someone would be doing.
Look, our view is that the privatisation of water companies has been an utter failure.
Shambles.
And yeah, it is a shambles, frankly. And this kind of monopoly of different providers and how that kind of works in reality has meant they've run down our infrastructure. And over a period of time now, I don't know how many reports we have to see before we address it, but it came through in the Grenfell inquiry.
Yes,
we saw
it did.
Report,
that didn't get as much attention as it should have.
No. Well, there was some significant issues that needed addressing, and
but because there were so many significant ones,
I don't think this should be seen as a letter to some of those aspects. All of this needs to be corrected in conjunction with one another. Dan Stevens has looked into it as well, specifically, I think, to Wales, and we are seeing that hydrants, of which firefighters look to access very regularly, are either defective or aren't working as they should be. And I think that's become a challenge at the coalface, if you like, of firefighters doing their work. But as you talk about contamination, that's a bad thing, not just for firefighters, but for everybody using a water supply. And I'm not sure we've won the argument governmentally that this needs to be addressed in the way we think it does.
No.
With bringing it back into public ownership.
It is beyond a privilege to be able to bring the Firefighters podcast to you, and we are so grateful for every single person that supports, listens, shares, and follows our journey. And to help us keep doing it, create more, reach more guests internationally, and make the podcast sustainable, we're asking for you to help. And to do this, we've set up a Patreon page. By joining our Patreon community, you will get access to every single full episode archive we have ever made. Now, hundreds and hundreds of key documents that we've got in there on fire behavior, firefighter health, cancer risks, incident debriefs, and so much more. So if you feel like you want to join the Patreon crew and help us make this possible, head to patreon.com/TFFPC or check the link in any episode podcast notes.
So we can't keep kicking this can down the road. It is one of those public-private ownership of any industry becomes a political football. We've got to take it out of that arena and say, this is why it's a matter for us. This is why it's a matter for firefighters. There were people, and there are people, both in government and in and around our own sector, that say SBU, keep out of this type of thing. But
Really?
no, if it impacts directly on our industry, on our duties, on our members, then we think we've got a stake in it. And that's why, certainly Steve Wright, the General Secretary, has been very clear that this is an aspect that needs to be addressed. And the article speaks to that, as you outlined, Pete. But it's an absolute travesty what's happened to our water companies. And frankly, this government...
Because you think the main focus is around,
like,
people are talking about the housing shortages and they're just looking at water and they're looking at it always from a governmental perspective. They have this unconscious bias that they're looking at it solely as a domestic water supply. Mm-hmm. And they never really think, because why would they? Because there's people in the fire service that don't really think about water capacity and flow rate when it comes to, they just go wet stuff on the hot stuff. Yeah. And we think that will solve it eventually. And it will. I mean, they'll all go out eventually. But it depends how much of the estate you want us to lose before we manage to do that. Yeah. And this level of infrastructure, I mean, water flow has been a problem for decades. It really has been a problem for decades. And then, like you say, when we privatized it, it just made the problem 10 times worse because people weren't being held for the same standards. There was people looking to make cost savings because these are for-profit companies. They were putting in some substandard hydrants. They were putting in substandard infrastructure at new sort of estates and stuff like that. And we are so down the line. We have maintenance technicians and hydrant technicians and, every station has a water reference and all that jazz. We have not got the resource to be looking and inspecting these properly.
It's one of those areas where the standardisation has slipped as well. We've seen developers now cutting corners, which in essence reduces the ability of firefighters when they attend a few years later at house fires. And, it's an utter travesty. That goes back to the points I think we're very clear on, that there needs to be the nationalisation of water again. And that needs to sit alongside a set of standards to ensure that, when needed, firefighters can access that water resource, as quickly as possible. And it's got to be a competent resource as well. It can't be inadequate as it is today.
It feels like... Do you ever struggle staying optimistic? Because I struggle with it sometimes because we get a lot of emails and messages about some good and bad stuff that's happening in the sector. And I can only imagine you guys and girls are dealing with this stuff every single day. And if all you see is challenges and red flags and closed doors and obstacles, do you ever find it difficult to stay positive? I mean, I'm not saying you've lost a passion for anything or anyone's lost passion, but what I'm saying is it difficult to stay optimistic that we are going to continue to make more progress when there's so many people screaming for money and water and resources and support from the government? Do you know what I mean? I really am getting to that point. I don't know if I'm getting an overexposure to it. I don't know what it's going to look like in 10, 15
I think
years.
We all do. Certainly when you listen to a lot of it, and people are more generally inclined to tell you the bad things, but I tend to lead the cynicism to others. Okay. And I genuinely believe that actually we are able, and we have seen in the last year, our ability to make advances. The very birthing of the Ministry Advisory Group, I think, has brought sector together and it's making advancements. Mm-hmm. The ability of this government to react to firefighter health and implement health monitoring. The fight back our members led in Oxfordshire to deliver a change to that process there shows me that when we're able to come together and unite around a single cause, we're able to deliver outcomes for which we will determine to be successes. And actually probably what we're not very good at, and firefighters tend not to be very good at, is talking about those wins and those successes. And there are a lot of them. We just seem to focus on the bad things, and that's probably a very natural human reaction to things. But I do actually think we are moving forward in a good way, but we're up against a lot of challenges that we need to work together to overcome.
I want to be respectful of your time, but I wanted to ask you two closing ones. One that was actually sent in from someone the other day, and I nearly forgot it. I've just seen it at the bottom of this thing. Someone asked about bringing back LFs in more organisations. Have you heard anything about that? Do you know much about that? Leading firefighters as trying to have an in-between pay scale and competency recognition, whether it's for people that can solely act up total hard left just before we close, but I didn't know if you could shine any light on that. Is that, again...
We're having a national discussion about pay reform, and it may bring about a whole different pay structure to that what we've had. You know, we know the pay structure in the fire service moves on every 25 years, and actually we're at that point now, aren't we, where we're talking about it. What we've seen is when this current system was designed, watch managers are on fire appliances. In a lot of places they're not now, and therefore people think you need a contact point between what watch managers were and what crew managers probably are, and firefighters. I wouldn't say we're opposed to anything or looking at anything, but we think it needs to be centrally kind of brought about. And again, if we allow there to be different practices in different services, we're going to get away from that kind of principle of nationalised standards where we want to be. So I think we need to have that discussion sensibly at a national level in and around that pay reform, which is a really positive space and positive discussion we're having right now.
Can be,
Yeah, about kind of how we drive our service forward. And that means listening to differing perspectives about how you do things, which again is a challenge, but what we're saying, or what I'm very clearly saying as part of that work, is there's no set start and finish to consultation. I know. In this discussion, people chip in, tell us what you think, and we'll bring that in and kind of allow it to shape what we're doing. You know, I know some processors say, oh, we're going to do our consultation for 28 days starting on the 1st of April. Well, we're not saying that. We're saying that we're doing it all the way through from start to finish. And if you've got any views, share them. To anyone who's listening and wants to kind of have their say on that, you know, feel free to get in touch, because we're genuinely interested in getting more views and more perspectives into the pot than less. And that is the way we'll make the better outcomes.
Well, I sincerely hope that when you are having those discussions, all the services, and I will also use the word brigades specifically, that are attending those discussions are on board, that whatever we decide, we're all going to move ahead with it together, because we've all had an opportunity to be listened to. We can't agree something and then walk away from the table and go, sod that, I'm doing something else.
Yeah.
That's not going to work. We need to, come on, we need to get us to get there. Mate, I absolutely love that. I want to be respectful of your time. I know you've got a train to catch. I'd love to continue. It's been too long since you've had a member of the union on. I want to keep touching base every 6 months or so. You guys and girls doing some incredible work, and I know it's greatly appreciated by almost all of the UK Fire and Rescue Service, minus the small percentage, which probably want something else, but they're also grateful for what we get. I always say to people, when you see the great stuff the union are doing, don't make good the enemy of perfect. Wasn't exactly what you wanted, but is it progress? Yes, it's progress. Okay, well then progress is the metric, yeah? This was progress, and then we push again and we get progress on the next one.
Things as stepping stones. We all know the final destination is hard to achieve, but we've got to be travelling towards it all the time.
1000%, brother. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you, man, and I look forward to catching up with you again soon.
Yeah, you take care, Pete. Cheers.
Well, that's it for today, folks. Hope you took a lot away from that episode. We started the Firefighters podcast to develop, inspire, connect, motivate, represent, and most importantly, celebrate the world of incredible emergency services operators and the wider sector through this series of wide-ranging conversations. We really love creating this podcast and bringing it to so many people. Did you know you can also find these on YouTube? We do a lot of video podcasts now. You can head over to our YouTube page and follow, subscribe there. And as a final ask from us, whatever platform you're on, please rate the podcast. It really helps us as a key performance indicator to reach more and more people. I've been your host, Pete Wakefield. This has been the Firefighters Podcast. And wherever you are in the world, please stay safe, be happy, and where possible, please remember and support your firefighters and first responders. I'll see you next time.